Welcome back to Gary's Economics. Today we're going to talk about Liz Truss's energy plan. Okay, so we're filming this on Thursday morning. The plan has just come out. The plan is to cap energy bills such that the average household will be paying £2,500 a year. And that is going to cost the government, it looks like about £150 billion. And that's going to be funded, from the looks of it, by government spending. All right, so I've got some big concerns about this plan, and I think it's really interesting. I think we can learn a lot by talking about it. So the first thing to say is that obviously the situation is basically a disaster, and it's absolutely essential that some support is provided. So it's good that support is there. The problem is the way that the support is designed. Okay, so I think the most interesting thing to comment on here is we are making basically exactly the same mistake that we made during COVID with regards to the economy again. So in COVID, the government gave out a huge amount of money, and that money basically all ended up with richer people, which meant that by the end of COVID, your average rich person had accumulated more than £100,000 cash. And I was saying from the beginning of COVID, if you do this, if you allow a huge amount of money to go from the government to the rich, then afterwards you'll get a massive increase in inequality, a massive increase in inflation, and essentially a cost of living crisis, which we had. And then we had the cost of living crisis, right? So if you haven't yet watched it, I would encourage you to go back and rewatch the first video on this channel, which talks about how COVID is making the rich richer. That goes through really clearly the simple question of, if the government is giving out a huge amount of money, who's going to get it? Explaining how it's the rich, and then talking about, well, what does it mean if the rich accumulate a huge amount of cash? Because this energy crisis is basically being dealt with in exactly the same way, which is the government is giving a huge amount of money out, and obviously people are happy because that's supporting their energy bills, but the money ends up with richer people. So the end result will be a massive increase in inequality. So in COVID, they gave out, by the end, about £600 billion, which was about £13,000 for every adult in the country. That all went to the rich. And here they're giving out another £150 billion, which is another about £4,000 for every adult in the country. And that, again, in this case, is going basically directly to energy companies. And it's really important to realize when money goes out and it goes to energy companies, the money doesn't disappear. That will be held by the energy companies. It will be paid out as dividends to the shareholders of energy companies, which are richer people. And what we'll see here is another massive accumulation of cash to richer people. Now, I've been saying from the beginning of COVID, if you allow rich people to accumulate cash, that will push prices up. And now we've seen a situation where that has happened, prices have gone up, and we're responding by giving the rich another massive chunk of cash. And I think there's a real danger here that we start to get into a cycle of, we have a crisis, we give the rich a ton of money, and it truly was a huge amount of money that we gave them during COVID. That understandably pushes up prices and pushes down living conditions for ordinary families. And then we respond by giving the rich another ton of money, which will probably push prices up again, which will mean we'll have to respond again by giving the rich a ton of money. It's a really dangerous cycle. And if anyone is a student of economic history, they will be aware that this has happened before. In the downfall of most big historical empires, they've reached a point at the end where rather than funding the things they need through taxation, especially of the richer people who can afford it, they start to basically print money and borrow from the rich and try to fund things that way. And it can get into a bad spiral of, you borrow from the rich, you give the money back to the rich, they get richer, you can't afford the things you need, so you borrow from the rich again. And I think this could be really a dangerous space. And I'm worried, to be honest. If we keep trying to run the economy this way, where we pretend we can have the things we need without ever taxing the rich who increasingly own everything, then the rich will get richer and richer and richer, and the rest of us will get poorer and poorer and poorer. And you will see this progressive falling in living conditions. So, I would really encourage you to think about what it means when an economic policy results in a massive, massive cash windfall for the rich. What that means for you, what that means for for our society, because increasingly it seems like we're going to run our economy this way. Yeah, think about that. But most importantly, understand that 150 billion, it's not going to disappear. It's going to go to the energy companies, and then it's going to go to wealthy individuals. And they will use that money to push up prices, to buy the houses that your kids need. You know, they'll give it to their kids. They'll buy houses. Ultimately, it's going to cause inequality to increase even more. And that's going to have really damaging effects on the economy. Okay, so that's the first point, which is that this is going to lead to a massive increase in inequality and a massive accumulation of cash by the rich, just like COVID did. The second point is, and I think this is a really interesting one, doesn't actually really solve the energy crisis. The reason for that is this, okay? There is less energy in Europe now than there was 2-3 years ago, because Russia is reducing the amount of energy it's exporting to Europe. If there's less energy, that means somebody has to use less energy. This is like a physical fact. There's less energy, somebody has to use less. So that raises the question of who is going to reduce their energy consumption? So normally, when there's less energy, what will happen in a capitalist free market economy is the price goes up. And then what you will see is poorer and ordinary people will have to reduce their energy consumption. And that's not a good way to deal with things, because in many cases that means not turning your heating on in the winter. So in the absence of any intervention, what you would see is a massive decrease of energy usage by ordinary families and by poorer people, which would be terrible. You know, cold homes, people get sick, people will die. That's what would happen. So definitely you need some intervention. But somebody has to reduce their energy consumption, right? So what a sensible government would be doing would be looking at the country and saying, well, where can we healthily reduce our energy consumption? In what areas are we using more energy than we need? How do we reduce these kinds of non-necessary energy consumption so that ordinary families can keep the heating on? Now, I want you to ask yourself a question. Under this plan, where the government is capping bills for everyone, including the very rich, who is going to reduce their energy consumption? Who? If the prices are not going up beyond a certain point, who's going to reduce their energy consumption? Well, we know that prices are still increasing significantly versus last year. We know also that the average rich individual has accumulated 100, 200 grand cash over the last 2 years. Their bills are being capped. Are the rich going to reduce their energy consumption here? Why would they? They're richer than they've ever been. They're having their bills capped. They are not going to reduce their energy consumption, right? So if you have a situation where we have less energy and we know the rich are not going to reduce their energy consumption, then still it will have to be poorer and ordinary families that have to reduce their energy consumption. So I honestly don't think this plan is going to successfully save ordinary families from being in cold homes this winter, because the energy is not there. The rich are not going to reduce their consumption, which means ordinary families will still have to reduce their consumption. I think what this shows us is that our government is taking a phenomenally naive approach to an energy crisis, which is we have less energy, but the government, rather than trying to manage a reduction in usage of energy, is just giving out money. But money is not energy. If there's less energy, you need to manage it so that the people who have the most excessive energy consumption reduce their energy usage. That is the only way to save ordinary families. And we're doing nothing to do that. Nothing to do that. Which means rich people will not reduce their energy consumption, which means ultimately families will still go cold. You know, if there's not enough energy, you need to manage it so that the rich reduce their energy consumption, and that is not going to happen. And I think what this highlights more than anything is that our government, and in many cases our economists, are continuing to be naive about the importance of distribution. And never could it be more obvious than here. Look, there's a limited amount of energy available. If we do not save that energy for the people and families that need it, then they will not get enough. And you need to have a policy which actively focuses on reducing energy consumption of the rich and supports the poor, and it's not there. So my main concern is that unfortunately it's not going to work. The rich will not reduce their energy consumption because they're having their bills paid by the government, by the taxpayer, which means there won't be enough energy. the price of energy will go through the roof because the rich are not reducing their usage and there's not enough to go around, which means the government will be paying an enormous amount of money directly to the energy companies who are themselves owned by the rich, which means the rich will make an enormous profit, and ordinary families will see their homes go cold. So I know that's not a positive message, but it's important to realize it doesn't have to be this way, right? The total costing of this package is £150 billion. That's estimated at this moment. If you look at the Times top 250 rich list, you'll see that in the first 12 months of COVID, those 250 individuals increased their wealth by £106 billion. So this could be paid for almost entirely just by taxing 1 year of excess profits of just 250 individuals in the country. If you broaden it and look at the amount of money that the rich as a whole have made in the last 3 years, that is £600 billion. We know that because the government's given it out. So somebody must have it, and it is the rich who have it. If we were to take that money back, we could give every single adult in the country £13,000 each without borrowing anything, and this crisis would be over. So I think realistically, there are alternatives, but only if we start accepting that what we have here is fundamentally a distributional crisis, and that we need to be managing the wasteful energy usage of the rich and the very rich, and that is the only way to save poor and ordinary families. So look, I'm sorry that's not a positive message, but people need to know what's going to happen. And yeah, good luck. Thank you.